there, you can see some of them are covered, and there's hundreds of tombs on this entire Giza Plateau. Hundreds. On the eastern side, not the western side.
What Bill discovered in 2010 and 11 in this cave cleanup project was absolutely phenomenal. It should have been headline news across the world. He discovered many entrances and doorways into this cave system and this network of tunnels, which is literally 200 feet from the Sphinx. You could throw a stone and hit the Sphinx from there. And we know that these tunnels run straight towards the Sphinx, some of them at least. We know it's also connected into his stable. And so if we can excavate down under the stable, we could probably enter the same network of tunnels from there. Either way, I don't know why the world has never been told about this, but all of these entrances that he discovered ended up being covered over soon after. Bill had actually funded and financed this entire operation, and now all the doors he discovered were covered over except a couple, which are now used to make money for certain people who give private tours of them and keep the door locked. Just north of the Sphinx, beginning in the cave cleanup area and moving west from there, there are a dozen different entrances carved into a cliff face. And these entrances have all been cemented shut, they've been sealed up with masonry, or else they're covered with gates and doors that have locks on them. No one has ever been allowed to go inside these chambers, whatever they are, and film them or show what's inside. No one's allowed to see what's behind these doors. However, Bill actually obtained a map, which has never been made public before and which shows exactly what's behind them. This map is incredibly important. No one has ever been shown the truth about what's behind these doors before. Behind each one of these gates, we can see individual chambers, and each of these chambers, you can see a small square drawn as if on the floor plan, which suggests that there are shafts within each one of these, which go straight down and connect into this very same network that's tied into the network under the cave cleanup area. There are many tunnels under there, and there are confluences of those tunnels within specific chambers. Beyond that, we also see two entire temple complexes that are hidden underneath where the road is currently. These two temples have never been announced to the world. These are clearly underground structures that the Egyptians know about and aren't making public. We can only see them on this map. It would seem that these temple complexes must be tied into the tunnel network that we're investigating. They must have an access point somewhere. The Egyptians clearly know that they exist. They're shown in this map that's used by the archaeologists that are allowed to work in these tunnels. However, they've never been reported to the public. No one's ever seen photos from inside. No one knows of their existence whatsoever. Based on Edgar Cayce's information and all the information that Bill has collected, we believe there's a very good chance that this is the exact location of the Hall of Records itself. And perhaps the Egyptians know that, and maybe that's why they intentionally buried all the entrances that William discovered. A discovery like this could only help the Egyptian tourism industry. It would only make the world more excited about Egypt and more interested in Egypt. This is not just carelessness or ignorance, this is an intentional effort to cover up what's there. There's no doubt about that. As I mentioned in episode 1, I believe the records actually take many different forms. Some are inscribed on the walls in stone or on tablets, some may even be on papyrus, but they also take other forms. Edgar Cayce often referred to these records as the Hall of Records, or sometimes as the Pyramid of Records, and other times still he said the Tomb of Records. So Tomb of Records is a very interesting phrase. Is it a tomb or is it a library? Normally those are two separate things. But we have to consider the possibility, what if a mummy itself could be a form of records? What if the records themselves were the DNA of this mummy? And hypothetically speaking, let's ask ourselves, what would happen if someone discovered under the Giza Plateau a mummy that had DNA which was, technically speaking, not human DNA? What would happen to that mummy? What would happen to that tomb? Bill actually describes 3 separate instances where he came in contact with mummies that were seemingly non-human in origin. Lucina actually pinpointed this location in 2006, saying she believed there was an extremely important tomb at that spot. Potentially, it could be the tomb of the builder of the Great Pyramid, whether it's Khufu or someone else very important. In 2009, a group actually discovered this tomb that Lucina had predicted would be in that exact location. What they found was very shocking. The entire thing was covered up in a very brutal way. There were 2 separate videos that came out immediately after this event purporting to be from inside this actual tomb. One of them was either completely fake or at least not from that location. However, the other one we do believe was real and is actually showing what was in this tomb. Considering Edgar Cayce's suggestions, it's not impossible that this is in fact the tomb of records that he was referring to. We also have official photographs from the investigation that took place after the event. Because this entire situation got completely covered up, this video is the only evidence we will ever have of this tomb and of the mummy inside of it. It is extremely important. It's been scrubbed from the internet, but I was able to get a copy, and so I'm including it in full as William tells the story of what happened. We have to ask whether or not a mummy itself could be a part of the records. Could this have been the tomb of records? And is the mummy actually a record of a certain type of DNA?
In 2005, my wife Lucina first came to Egypt and was showing everybody using dowsing areas to do GPR scans. She returned in 2006 when I met her, and we did the GPR scans in various locations. So in 2006, when my wife came back, we did the GPR scan, what we call the stable area, or GPR scan number 9, or in the pictures that you'll see after we evaluated the GPR scan, it's called top secret. Okay, so my wife indicated that this whole area that was behind the concrete wall was a trash pit. They had gone in and just dumped metal and trash and everything. It was 3-4 meters thick. And she said, she says, okay, down here is the entrance to the tomb of Khufu. And everybody believed her, because when we left, the people in the village started digging on the other side of the wall, inside their house. Now, this has been going on for decades, centuries maybe, but as long as the houses, people have been in the area, they've all been looking for the secret treasure of Khufu and Khufu himself. So they started excavating inside their house. Unfortunately, they were underfinanced. They didn't have the funds to secure an adequate, safe entrance to the underground. And the people we know of, there's a discrepancy as to how many, but we're going to just say 6 men because we can confirm that. We believe that it was more, like 9. But there were like 20 people involved in this whole thing because they had supposedly found the mummy of Khufu 30 meters underground on the other side of the wall where my wife had sat, and on the village side of the wall, opposite where my wife was saying, okay, it's on the other side of the wall. And they had gone down, and we have the evidence and the proof and the reports, and they have other people that have done that work for me, that they did go down 30 meters. Okay, and this is why I am really hesitating to talk about anything else right now, but and that they did find the tomb, they did find the body of Khufu. What happened was they did bring a sarcophagus out, a mummy, an alien-faced mummy. Okay. The man they had, these men had gone down and taken all of this gold, treasure, and it out of the tomb. And they were taking it to another site location off of Giza. And these people got caught for trying to sell them. And all of those people were beaten to death, and thrown in prison, and nobody knows what's happened to them. However, the misfortune was 6 men never made it out. After these other people had taken the gold and everything, they carried out the sarcophagus mummy and put it into a hearse. Now, I'm going to step back one thing. The men had already died before this happens, and the Egyptians said, okay, we'll go in and we will excavate a new pit that had caved in on these men and buried them alive. 6 men we know for sure. Giving Trevor the official color prints taken by the recovery team of the Egyptians themselves, the person in charge of the project. He gave that to me personally. He was a personal friend, and he was fired by Dr. Hawass and cannot get a job in Egypt. Okay, this is how important this information is because of what had happened. Now, I don't want to accuse anyone of anything. We have the facts, but I'm not going to point fingers. The information will reveal in time, I believe. Anyway, the time when the men were trapped down underneath, one of the men said, I forgot I have to take my medicine. I forgot my medicine. I have to go get my medicine. And he was the Judas of the group. He went out, climbed out of the hole, and when we did the investigation, they say that a man saw him come out of the hole. And these people knew what was going on at the time. Everybody knew what was going on, okay? And when he came out of the hole, this guy said he heard a poof, like an automobile backfiring or a motorcycle backfiring. It sounded like that. He said it was almost like shotgun blast. But he heard poof, and then he heard another poof, and then he heard a third one. And when that happened, the entire building collapsed. That building of the house collapsed into the shaft, burying all the people alive. They did have another access from up top, another tunnel. They had another, and what they were doing was they were using that tunnel to take everything out. But the sarcophagus that they found was too large. Unfortunately, one of the 6+ men that was down there happened to be, I'm going to go on record, a Russian mafia leader in the area, and he was running the whole show. And he was caught down there with these other men. Nobody knew that this was going to happen. And so the Russian mafia went to the authorities and said, my brother is down there. I want my body of my brother. And they were just going to leave them there. Okay. Now what had happened was when the incident happened where everything collapsed, the locals went immediately and they were drilling and running a air pipe, plastic pipe, through the dirt. And they brought in all kinds of equipment, and they were doing this at another level, okay? And they were pushing this pipe to run oxygen to these men for them to have oxygen until they could be recovered. At that point, the Egyptians came in and took all of the equipment and forbid the people to save the men that were in the capture. Okay, now I have that officially, and I actually have the videos of all of that, and I have to find it, but all of this was recorded on a video, and that video was actually given to the Egyptians long ago, okay, at the time when we were doing the investigation. And so when the Russian man said, I want my brother's body. He forced them to dig another shaft right next to it, the Egyptians. They went down, excavated the bodies. This is the pictures that I've given to Trevor. What happened underground is questionable as to what all the details were, but if you take a close look at the interior wall, there's blood splatter everywhere. Now, some say that there was that these men were attacked by an underground creature, and everybody believed that. Now, what was interesting was at that time I was trying to buy the stable, and this was a property that they wanted me to help support, and the Russian mafia said no. They didn't want me involved, and I had the money. Okay, and so we were looking at buying what became the stable project, and it took 1 year. This incident happened in 2009, and I could not. It took me 1 year to buy the stable because the Russians blocked me from the sale. And finally, I was able to purchase it at $25,000 American.
This is particularly interesting because we do believe that these records may have been located very close to this cave cleanup area underneath it or in that general vicinity. And this is exactly where the men were killed, in the collapsed shaft. And so it's possible that this mummy they discovered was in the Tomb of Records itself. Potentially it was a part of the Hall of Records. This is a massive cover-up, and this would not happen if it were just a normal mummy. There was something extremely important about what was found at this location, and the world has never been told the truth. Everyone who knew anything about this excavation disappeared. This was sending a very profound message to anyone in the village who would consider digging in their own basement. We're given very little information to work with here, and so we have no idea if this could have been Khufu himself or if it was someone else. We're not allowed to see the tomb or the mummy or the sarcophagus. It all got completely covered up. If there's one thing we know for sure about this situation, it's that the building did not suddenly, randomly collapse in on itself for no reason. It was demolished intentionally. These men were murdered intentionally in order to cover up what they had discovered. Why would the Egyptian government not have allowed the families and loved ones of these men to run oxygen to them in order to try and save them? They didn't excavate and go down to get these bodies until 4 or 5 days after the event because they wanted to make sure everyone down there was dead and couldn't speak about what they'd seen. We also know that when the sarcophagus was removed from the site and loaded up into a vehicle, the chief of police ended up looking at the actual face of this mummy, and he broke into tears and had an extremely emotional reaction to seeing it. We know that it had enormous eyes as depicted on the sarcophagus, so whether or not this was an extraterrestrial or some odd type of humanoid, we know that whatever this mummy is was so important that 6 to 9 men were murdered in order to cover up its existence. What could possibly justify that? There are also many other points of context that indicate this mummy was extremely important. Our friend Richard Gabriel investigated this situation immediately in its aftermath. He was there on the ground talking to the families of the victims. He was there investigating everything. He wrote a very important article that tells the entire story of what happened, and that will be linked in the description. There may be some people who are not happy about this film going public, but we believe that in order to honor those men who lost their lives, the least we can do is show the world the truth about why it all happened. This video is extremely important, and the world deserves to see it. As strange as this story may sound, it is not the only instance in which Bill came in contact with what could be called potentially non-human mummies.